I was playing the piano. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. But I do play with wonderful expression. I don't know what it is about pianists. Well, perhaps it is that they are foreigners. Well, they all are, aren't they? I mean, even those born in England become foreigners after a while. It's so clever of them. And a compliment to their art. I'm going to tell you about a bird in South America. Now, this bird, if seen by you unawares, flies to hide itself. But if it has seen you first, it imagines that it remains invisible and nothing will induce it to retreat. The bird trappers catch it quite easily, merely by advancing backwards. Now that's surely philosophy, isn't it? The bird, having once made you the object of its contemplation, has every reason to believe that you have no independent existence. You are what you are because it has made you the object of its thought. And if it does not think about you, then you will not exist. And who knows, the bird may be right. For try as we may, we cannot get behind the appearance of things to the reality. And the terrible reason may be that there is no reality in things apart from their appearances. Philosophy from the bird. So we continue the evening advancing backwards. I enlist no sympathy. The pain comes and goes. Actually, illness and suffering always inspire me with revulsion. A man with a toothache ought to have my sympathy, but I feel only aversion. I find it difficult to look at him. It bleeds, I'm afraid. My second year in prison, I fell on a stone floor. I was very weak and I struck my head. It seems that I burst my eardrum. And I was given no treatment. Now my doctors say that I mustn't drink absinthe or even champagne anymore. Yes, well. Isn't it odd how many people regard our pleasures as their natural enemies? To me, a life without pleasure would not be worth living. The first duty of life is to enjoy it. But the second duty is no one has yet decided. Let us get what pleasure we may in the fleeting days. For the night cometh, the silence that can never be broken. People are afraid of themselves, you know. Courage has gone out of the race, if we ever really had it. The fear of society, which is the basis of morality, and the fear of God, which is the basis of religion, these are the two things that govern us. Oh, that is not to say that people are not charitable. They do feed the hungry and knit ugly garments for the poor. But their own souls starve and are naked. People seem to die of a sort of creeping common sense. The only things one never regrets are one's mistakes. Resist temptation and your soul grows sick with longing. I believe if one man were to live out his life fully and completely, were to give form to every feeling, expression, to every thought, reality, to every dream, I believe the world would gain such a fresh impulse of joy that we would forget about the maladies of medievalism and return to the Hellenic ideal, to something richer and finer. But the bravest amongst us is afraid of himself. Every impulse we strive to strangle broods in our mind and poisons us. I'm going to tell you one more story. Now, all of the bronze in the world had disappeared. All in the world save the bronze of an image called the sorrow that endureth forever. And yet he took this image and he set it in a great furnace and he gave it to the fire. And from the bronze of the sorrow that endureth forever, he fashioned a new image, the pleasure that abideth for a moment. You see, the artist knows. Let us get what pleasure we may in the fleeting days, for the night comes silent. Does that sound dangerous to you? Huh? Well, all ideas are dangerous. I make a great difference between people. I choose my friends for their good looks, my acquaintances for their good characters, and my enemies for their good intellects. When a man cannot be too careful in the choice of his enemies, I haven't one who is a fool, consequently they all appreciate me. Does that sound vain to you? Well, I'm afraid it is a little vain. I am the only person in the world whom I should like to know thoroughly. But I don't see much chance of it just at present. It is always better, you know, to discover other people slowly. I like to find out people for myself, but that is not always possible. For instance, my mother, I recall her once bringing me up to a most truculent and red-faced old gentleman covered all over with orders and ribbons, and hissing in my ear in a tragic whisper that must have been perfectly audible to everyone else in the room, "Sir Humpty Dumpty, you know, Afghan frontier, Russian intrigue, very successful man, hates Mr. Gladstone but is very interested in beetles, wife killed by an elephant." Indeed, my mother treated her guests exactly as an auctioneer treats his goods. She either explained them away entirely or told one everything about them except what one really wanted to know. Well, most people are other people in any case. Their thoughts are other people's opinions, their lives of mimicry, and their passions of quotation. I tell you this story of my mother only out of love. She was devoted to her family and to my father. When he was dying, I can still see her sitting there at his bedside with that sort of dark veil over her head, quite silent, quite calm. Nothing ever seemed to trouble her optimism. She believed that nothing but good can happen to us. When death came for my father and for my sister, she accepted both deaths with serenity and bore them both in the same highway. I have never known anyone to have such perfect faith. What she must have suffered from my prison sentence, I do not care to think. When she was told that she was going to die and that she could not see me, for I was not allowed to go to her, she said, "May the prison help you." Faith. If I appear to you to be quite serious now, it may be that I am. I know, of course, that life is far too important a thing ever to talk seriously about it. Humanity always takes itself so seriously, and that is the original sin. If only the caveman had been able to laugh, history might have been quite different. I can no longer laugh. In the year 1894, March, I launched an action of criminal libel against the Marquis of Queensberry. He had written me a note, you see, on a visiting card, which stated, "To Oscar Wilde posing as a sodomite." He misspelled it, of course. Well, since this statement was a gross representation of my relationship with his son, it seemed to me there was no other course to take. I tell you now that this course of action was the one disgraceful, unpardonable, and all-time contemptible action of my life. Why? Because I allowed myself to appeal to society for help and protection. My God, what colossal stupidity. The trial got all turned round, of course, and I found myself the victim. You have no conception of the hatred, the shame, the weariness of the whole thing. To see those people coming into the witness box against me, my God, it still makes me ill. There in that courtroom, vengeance had awakened and loosened her dogs upon the world. And for what? For that love that dares not speak its name. That's what they called it. A deep affection, as pure as it is perfect, and so misunderstood that I was placed in prison, condemned before I was tried. The trial itself was a farce. The judge stated that he was sorry he could not send me to the scaffold. Yes, the scaffold. For that love that dares not speak its name. Oh, I was not allowed a word, of course. I wanted to tell them that a man may keep the law and yet be worthless, that he may break the law and yet be fine, that he may be bad without ever having done anything bad. He may be a very great poet, a great man of science, a young university student, or one who watches sheep upon the moor. It does not matter what he is, as long as he realizes the perfection of the soul that is within him. Sins of the flesh are nothing. Maladies to be cured by physicians, if they should be cured. It is the sins of the soul that are shameful. Cruelty and starvation, not sin, are the parents of crime. In the old days, men had the rack. Today we have the press. I don't think it's an improvement. The press is very much like the women of our time who find a new scandal is becoming as a new bonnet, and they are them both every afternoon in the park at 5:30. The private lives of men and women should not be the subject of public discourse. The public has an insatiable curiosity to know everything, except what is worth knowing well. If not the press or the public, on whom can one rely? Friends, all of us at a certain time of life who have done anything like I have done must realize that they no longer have any friends in this world. Only lovers, if we are lucky. May I present to you then Lord Alfred Douglas. Clearly that is his name. Now listen carefully, for I am about to tell you that I loved him once. If that shocks you, you may leave, but you have no hope of getting your money back. It is a love that has long since expired of mendacity and endless. Dear, dear Bones. How odd to look back on a life so vivid with emotional intensity and joy and find that it seems only illusion. Life cheats us with shadows, and on some grey, windy dawn of silence we find ourselves looking with callous wonder on a heart of stone that once we had so wildly worshipped and so madly kissed. Dear, dear boy. It was 2 years in prison. The first night, they made me undress before them and get into some filthy water, which they called a bath, and dry myself in a damp brown rag. The first visit of the chaplain began with these words, "Mr. Wilde, did you have morning prayers at your house?" No, I said, "I'm afraid not." "Well, Mr. Wilde," he said, "you see where you are now." That was my comfort from the church. There was a man in front of me at exercise who spoke to me. He whispered to me in a way that he would not be seen how sorry he was for me, how he hoped I would be able to bear up. I stretched out my hand and I said, "Oh, forgive me." The kindness of his voice brought tears to my eyes. And I was heard, and I was seen. They sought to punish me immediately, a dreadful punishment. I dare not think about it, even though they are infinitely cunning with their malice, with their cruelty. They first rob you of all hope, and then rule you by fear, just fear alone. It is ingenious what they can do with fear. After my first year, I was transferred to Reading jail. In convict dress and handcuffed, we had to stop at Clapham Junction and wait nearly an hour for a train. I was recognized between the two warders. Of all possible objects, the most grotesque. A continuous stream of people who sneered and scoffed at me. Each train, as it came in, swelled the audience. Nothing could exceed their amusement. They stood in front of me, calling me names and spitting on the ground. And I couldn't help wondering if there was any punishment could teach humanity to such. Oh, I was allowed books in Reading jail. Yes, I thought of Greek literature at first, but I had no relish for that. And then I thought of Dante. Yes, of course, Dante. I read him every day in Italian, but it was neither his Purgatorio nor his Paradiso that seemed written for me. No, it was his Inferno that I read most of all. Well, why shouldn't I like it? I was in it. Hell, it was there. When they pronounce sentence, when they say 2 years of hard labor, it isn't the labor that is hard, it is the life there, the life that breaks down the body and the soul. Oh, I was warned, of course, as people advised me to leave England to escape the trial, to come here to France where they care for the humane ideal, the humane life. But I didn't listen to them. I listened to him, goading me on to fight against his father, pointing out contemptuously that he could prove nothing, that it was my duty to keep him from spreading his slander, and that if I did not, everyone would be laughing at me, judging me a coward. Oh, Bosie! So I stayed and was in prison, and only later found out the reason, that his hatred of his father was far greater than his love of me. But the very idea of his being the object of a quarrel between his father and a man of my position delighted him. He scented out the chance of a public quarrel, and he flew to it. A battle in which only he would be safe. How constrained. That the only flaw in the perfect symbolism of the gospel story is that Jesus was betrayed by Judas the foreigner, when he should have been betrayed by John, the beloved disciple. It was only those we love can betray us. 2 years. 2. Just before I was released, a small child was admitted to the prison, not more than 10. I could hear him crying out in his cell, crying to be let out, crying out for his parents, crying out in the darkness all night long. For 3 nights I heard his voice. Perhaps some of you have read my letter to the Navy Commodore about contaminating influence of prison life on young children, of the whole prison system. And I would ask you here tonight to speak out against the cruelty which is stupidity. You dear Bosie. In Reading jail by Reading town, there is a pit of shame, and in it lies a wretched man eaten by teeth of flame, and a burning, winding sheet he lies, and his grave has got no name. And there till Christ call forth the dead, in silence let him lie. The man had killed the thing he loved, so he had to die, and all men kill the thing they love. By all, let this be heard. Some do it with a bit of look. The coward does it with a kiss. The brave man with a sword. You may have noticed in any publication that the Ballad of Reading Jail was written by C33. That was my prison identification. Actually, I wrote most of that poem at the Hotel de la Plage at Beneval-Soleil, and I completed it in Naples. Yes. Now listen carefully, for I am about to confess to you that it was in Naples that Bosie and I met once again. Yes, we met for a few brief weeks. Actually, not I did what I could, but when my means were exhausted, then the evil days began. I was expected to write more plays, but I couldn't. I simply could not. And so finally, I was abandoned, left alone to my own device. I am still without sufficient funds, of course. And indeed, that is why we are gathered here this evening, isn't it? Oh, it is always very distressing to be in debt, but one must have some occupation. At any rate, you know, it is only by not paying one's bills that one can hope to live in the memory of the commercial classes. They say, no one, great or small, can be ruined except by his own hand. Well, I'm quite ready to go along with that. I have a distinct feeling that England requires more of me. If I'm still alive next year at the beginning of another century, I really think it would be more than the English could stand. I wish I could feel self-reproach. Oh, there's a luxury in that, you know. When we blame ourselves, we feel that no one else has a right to blame. It is the confession, not the priest, that gives us absolution. Few men, very few men of English letters have ever held such a position as I have held and had it so acknowledged. The gods have given me almost everything, a distinguished name, intellectual daring, social position. I made art of philosophy and philosophy of art. I treated art as the supreme reality and life as a mere mode of fiction. I took drama, and I gave it as personal a note of expression as the sonnet. I awoke the imagination of my century so that it created legend and myth about me, and then I let myself be lured into long spells of senseless and sensual ease. I surrounded myself with small nations, meaner minds. I became the spendthrift of my own genius. And I found that it gave me a curious joy. Tired of being on the heights, I took to the depths for a new sensation, and I allowed pleasure to dominate. And now, today, tomorrow, I must free myself from any bitterness against the world. I must approach life from a new standpoint, for even to conceive of happiness now is so difficult for me. I must learn. I must learn. But those rooms, those damp, dreary little rooms where I must live, oh my God, if only I could forget about them. If I could only go to the Riviera for the winter, and live in some seaside village of the Latins with the blue sea at my feet and the blue sky over my head and God's sunlight all about me and no care for money, then I know that I would write again. I am certain of it. Just one beautiful work of art. Just one. Oh, I tell people that I am going to write again. I tell everybody that. It's a thing you repeat every day and mean to do the next. But in my heart, that chamber of dead echoes, I know that I know. But that room, that horrible little sitting room without even an outlook, it's so difficult. Then there's my health. You see, oh, what I wouldn't give to win back my youth. But just one day, youth is the only thing worth having. Youth is the Lord of life. Bonesy, Bonesy, with his rose-red youth and his rose-white voice. His shadow walks with me every day, you know. It wakes me at night to tell me the same story over and over until there is no sleep, till it is dawn. And then his soul walks between poetry and passion and follows me into the street. He betrayed me, you know. He betrayed me. How dare they? To punish men in the name of nameless morality. How dare they? What is the difference between one form of sexual indulgence and another? If it is a malady, why does it strike only the highest natures? The wit of man can find no argument to justify its punishment. I have lied to you tonight, you know. Yes, you do know, but you don't know where or when. Well, we learn nothing from experience, believe me. Experience is merely the name men give to their mistakes. And all it really demonstrates is that our future will be the same as our past. And that the sin we did once and with loathing, we will do many times and with joy. Last year at Calais, I was sitting in front of a cafe and a soldier passed me and our eyes met. Great dark eyes. An olive dark face of Florentine bronze by some great master. He looked like Napoleon when he was first consul, only less imperious, more beautiful. I asked him to have a drink, and in his quaint way said silly possibilities, and soon we were chatting away. And I discovered that more than anything else in the world, he wanted a bicycle with nickel-plated handlebars. He got his bicycle. But love does not traffic in the marketplace. Its joy is simply to feel itself alive. The aim of love is to love, no more, no less. So I must write again. Yes. I am going to write again, to write of everything beautiful in this most beautiful world. But they took me, you see, and they tortured me, and they made me learn pity and sorrow. Oh, if there is aught of nature in my soul, of gentle pity and fond sorrow, wither it up, blast it, bring it to nothing, or if thou wilt not, then will I myself cut pity with a sharp knife from my heart and strangle mercy in her sleep at night lest she speak. Haven't you ever awakened from one of those nights of horror, only to see the black fantastic shapes, the dumb shadows come crawling into your room and crouching there, while the sigh of the wind coming down from the hills wanders around that silent room as though it were afraid to waken you? How strange that I was not told that the brain can hold in a tiny ivory cell God's heaven and hell. My wife is dead. Did you know? Yes, last year she's dead. And a new life for me ends in her grave. So different. I have touched the moon. Why try any longer to rise such a little way from the ground? My wife is dead. My mother is dead. My work is finished. So is the after.
Oh, I know some of you out there might regard the consumption of that sand as something of a luxury. Well, you're right. And to that I say, give me the luxuries of life and I can dispense with the necessities. The evening is over. Good night.